Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Juliet, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. Before I pass it over to our speaker, Patrick, let me cover a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your screen are multiple engagement tools you can use. All tools are resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around to get the most out of your desktop space. You can expand your presentation area or maximize it to full screen by clicking on the arrows in the top right corner. If you have any audio or video issues, you can find answers to some common technical issues located in the Help widget at the bottom of your screen. Please note that a copy of today's slide deck and additional resources are available in the resource list. Please have a look and download everything that you may find useful. Also, the webinar will be recorded and sent via the email you registered with. Lastly, if you have any questions during the presentation, you can submit them through the Q&A widget. We're here to answer you live via the chat, so don't hesitate to reach out throughout the presentation. Now, I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Patrick Knowles. Patrick is a systems engineering and project management expert with deep experience in the aerospace and defense industry, including developing and fielding missiles, software, and commercial space products. As a senior solutions consultant at Jama Software, he helps organizations optimize their systems engineering and requirements management practices using Jama Connect. And with that, I'll pass it over to you, Patrick.
Thanks, Juliet. I'm Patrick Knowles. It's great to meet all you. Today, we are going to be looking at simplifying airborne systems, specifically lifecycle milestones, by using categories in Jama. As I mentioned, my name is Patrick Knowles. I'm a senior solutions consultant here, and it's just a pleasure to work with y'all. I'm in our aerospace and defense vertical, so my expertise comes from that within the industry, and now I'm happy to be sharing that with y'all as I work through consulting as well as webinars. Today's agenda, we're going to tackle really the core problem, the complex challenge of milestone deliveries. From there, I'm going to introduce this category's functionality and feature to all of you. If it's something you're familiar with, this will be a breeze. If it's something new to you, I hope this is a great introduction to how it works. Then we'll talk about how you categorize information, specifically with some best practices. So for even those who are used to using categories, this should be a refreshing little bit with maybe some new tricks that you can utilize. And then finally, we're going to talk about deploying this to your collaborative teams, which is really critical because if the data is categorized on day one and then the data changes or new data comes in, your teams are going to need to know how to manage this, how to look at the information, and it's going to help solve that complex challenge of milestone delivery and some of the issues that we're going to talk about there. So this complex challenge, deadlines, stress, there's data everywhere, it's disconnected, it's disparate, it's annoying. That's the core root problem here. But to elaborate on it, engineering in the digital age can feel like a maze, right? There's sometimes a lack of top-down visibility to deliverables. So if you're a program manager or a lead systems engineer or a chief engineer, you might struggle to see all the work that your teams are doing. And sometimes there's a lack of bottom-up visibility to the milestones. So if you're an engineer, you might not know about, what milestone comes next, what's due at that milestone. A lot of the time, that information is on a Word document or an Excel sheet or maybe a Confluence page at best, where it's listing out everything that's due, but it doesn't inherently connect to anything that is due and what those exact bits of information are. And that leads to some unclear methods for contributing, right? How do I, as an engineer, ensure that we're going to meet this deadline? I know what, I see on my Scrum board or I see from my manager or whatever it might be, but maybe at the end of the day, I don't really understand exactly how my little bit of data is getting into that greater picture for this delivery to our customer or to our internal stakeholders. And then, of course, the common issue is always that data is disconnected. But that's what Jama is here to help with, right? We're here to help you guide through that maze and to connect your data together to solve these key issues. So the risky scenario here is that your data is disconnected from a milestone and that maybe you forget to deliver a certain part of the data, or you deliver outdated bits of data or anything else that might happen there. And it's pretty common across engineering. It doesn't really matter where you work. There's always this struggle to get everything ready from pencils down to delivery or whatever it might be. There's big reviews related to all of this work. There's stakeholders, customers, and of course the program leaders that need to see this information, and they need to see the most up-to-date, correct information. And without, a clear way to connect your requirements specifically, because that's what we're going to mostly talk about here is requirements, but without a really clear way to connect your requirements to your milestones or the rest of your data to milestones, you run the risk of simply leaving things behind. So how can Jama help? Well, the specific use case we're going to talk about today is enabling our categories functionality in the tool. And we're going to line it up with milestones from regulatory documents. Specifically, this example is going to be based on ARP 4754B. However, if you are running the NASA systems engineering lifecycle and you know the milestones in there, you could also line this up to that or any other number of product lifecycle milestones. We're going to categorize data directly to things, and that's going to help you really line it up to each of these listed items over there in the screenshot on the right. And then your members of the team are going to be able to filter and view this data and see it grow and add to it. And it's going to be very transparent for them how they're connecting their information to the greater milestone. With our foundation laid there on what the problem is, I want to talk more about what categories are. So, what exactly is a category? Why do we believe this is a great option for you and the team to try and enable within your tool? Specifically, categories have some similar feel to some other features within Jama, like tags and pick lists. However, categories kind of win out overall with this specific use case for a number of reasons. First and foremost, categories are admin enabled and controlled. So your general user can't populate a category. They can assign information to a category, but they can't create new ones, which means that unlike tags, this is kind of configuration managed by your admins. Pick lists are also configuration managed by your admins. However, they aren't globally accessible to all item types. You're going to have to create a field for every single pick list that you want assigned to different item types. Categories, however, can be globally applied to an entire project or to the whole instance of Jama. That means that you don't have to go and assign them to each of your item types. They're going to connect to folders. They're going to connect to texts. They're going to connect with your specific requirement types, whatever it might be. And so that's an advantage that categories have. Also, categories can be available across multiple projects or just one specific project, which helps if you have kind of a multi-layered approach to your Jama Connect development of requirements. Finally, I'll hit why not use tags and pick lists. Tags, again, creatable and by the user and prone to error. If you type a capital letter in the wrong spot or put the wrong vowel in the wrong place, that's going to be there in perpetuity unless you have really strong tag cleanup processes. And pick lists and multi-selects, you have to create it for each item type. You have to maintain the pick list. And then if an item type is introduced to a project, you're going to have to re-add that pick list to it and so on and so forth. So categories is a little broader, but also just as controlled. And so you're able to kind of manage in a smoother way. So how do you set up categories? Well, you go to admin, categories, and then over there on the far right of this screenshot, you'll see enable categories is turned on. It's defaulted off for most instances, so make sure you turn it on first. From there, we're going to set up all the categories you see in front of you on the screenshot, as well as, any number of other categories you may want to enable. Now, once you've got everything enabled, it's all about how do you categorize the information. So we're going to walk through some instructions, some best practices, and then we'll do some demonstration, of course, here at the end of this section of the slides on how you do all this work. The first thing, like we mentioned, is enabling categories. You do that through the admin. You assign things to either projects or global within your Jama Connect instance, and then you start utilizing them. One of our best practices here is to manage categories through logical organizers. So folders, sets, components. That allows you to then click into the list view of that logical organizer and then assign all the categories to the items within it. You don't have to do this. This is just one of the more efficient ways, especially if you're enabling an architecture forward approach within your database. And of course, you can manage categories in bulk. Otherwise, this whole explanation wouldn't make much sense. So some of the tips, tricks, and best practices. Here, we've got the managing in bulk, and I'll show you how to do that live. We'll view categorized information in the Explorer tree via a filter, and so we've got to set up filters. Of course, those same filters can be exported or sent to reports, and then you can use multiple categories on the same item. So if one item is going to be delivered at the first milestone, and you want to continue to deliver it at the next milestone, you simply add both categories to it. And finally, you can always create baselines of everything filtered. So these filters that we're going to use to shrink down and narrow down the Explorer tree are also going to be very, very useful for baselining, for exporting, and for a number of other things.